In the spring of 1986, officials at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant faced a series of small decisions that seemed routine at the time. The reactor was scheduled for a safety test. Engineers planned to simulate a power failure and measure how long the turbines would continue generating electricity during an emergency shutdown. On paper, the procedure appeared straightforward. The test had been postponed before. On April 25th, operators prepared to run it during a planned maintenance period. But the electrical grid needed Chernobyl's power that evening, so the test was delayed by several hours. This meant a different shift would conduct the procedure, one less familiar with the specific protocols. When the test finally began after midnight, the reactor's power dropped far lower than intended. Operators faced a choice. They could abort the test and reschedule, or they could continue and attempt to raise the power back to acceptable levels. Records indicate they chose to proceed. To increase power output, operators withdrew most of the control rods from the reactor core. This left the system in an unstable configuration. The test parameters required keeping the reactor at reduced power, but with so few control rods inserted, the margin for error had effectively disappeared. The reactor's design contained vulnerabilities that were known to some scientists, but never widely communicated. Earlier incidents at other RBMK reactors had shown similar instabilities, but these events were classified. Plant operators worked without complete information about the risks they were managing. The culture of secrecy meant that lessons from previous near misses remained confined within bureaucratic channels rather than informing those who needed the knowledge most. Documentation from the period shows that safety protocols existed, but they were frequently overridden to meet production quotas. Managers prioritized operational targets over procedural compliance. This created an environment where cutting corners became normalized, where the inconvenience of delays seemed more significant than abstract safety margins. At 1:23 in the morning on April 26th, the test began. Within seconds, power surged uncontrollably. Operators attempted an emergency shutdown, but the reactor's design included a critical flaw. When control rods were fully inserted during a shutdown, their tips briefly increased reactivity before suppressing it. In a stable reactor, this posed no problem. In an already surging reactor, it triggered catastrophe. The power spike shattered fuel rods and ruptured cooling channels. Steam pressure blew the 1,000-ton reactor lid aside. A second explosion, likely caused by hydrogen or steam, destroyed the reactor building. Burning graphite and nuclear fuel were exposed to the open air. Firefighters arrived without understanding what they faced. They were told there had been a fire, not a reactor explosion. Many climbed onto the building's roof, directly above the exposed core, and worked to extinguish flames. The radiation doses they received were lethal, though the effects would not be immediate. In the days that followed, Soviet authorities delayed evacuating nearby Pripyat. Residents continued normal activities while radiation spread through the town. Historians suggest officials feared causing panic or admitting the scale of the accident. The evacuation order finally came 36 hours after the explosion. The initial response revealed how deeply institutional dysfunction had taken root. Local officials waited for direction from Moscow. Moscow officials debated how much information to release. Meanwhile, radiation monitors across Europe began detecting elevated levels, forcing acknowledgement of what Soviet authorities had hoped to contain quietly. The disaster was not the result of a single error. It emerged from a combination of factors that had accumulated over years. The reactor's design prioritized plutonium production over safety margins. Operators were inadequately trained on the specific risks of the RBMK reactor type. Safety culture at the plant emphasized meeting production targets rather than questioning procedures. The Soviet system discouraged reporting problems or challenging authority. Engineers who might have identified the design flaws had limited channels to raise concerns. When issues did surface, institutional pressure often led to minimization rather than correction. The cleanup operation, which continues to this day, required extraordinary sacrifice. Hundreds of thousands of workers, often called liquidators, were brought in to contain the damage. They built a concrete shelter over the destroyed reactor, cleared radioactive debris, and decontaminated surrounding areas. Many received radiation doses that would later cause serious health problems. Their work prevented far worse contamination, but it came at tremendous human cost. The cost of these accumulated choices became clear slowly. 31 people died in the immediate aftermath, mostly firefighters and plant workers. But the radioactive contamination spread across Ukraine, Belarus, and parts of Europe. The World Health Organization estimates that several thousand additional cancer deaths will ultimately be attributable to the radiation exposure, though exact numbers remain debated. The exclusion zone around Chernobyl encompasses more than 1,000 square miles. Over 300,000 people were permanently relocated. The economic cost to the Soviet Union has been estimated at hundreds of billions of dollars, a burden the struggling economy could not sustain. Beyond the immediate damage, Chernobyl eroded public trust in nuclear power. Planned reactors were canceled. Energy policies shifted. The accident influenced the Soviet Union's final years, as it exposed the costs of secrecy and institutional rigidity. The final enclosure over the destroyed reactor, completed in 2016, is designed to last a century. It stands as a monument to decisions that seemed manageable in the moment, but compounded into consequences that would persist for generations. What began as a postponed safety test became one of history's most expensive demonstrations that inaction and hesitation, when systems are already fragile, carry costs that far exceed the discomfort of stopping and reconsidering.